Cher Anderton, welcome to the Orgasmic Lifestyle Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here. For those who are unfamiliar with your work, could you tell us what you do?
Sure thing. I'm a mental health therapist. I'm based in Phoenix, Arizona, in the States. Mental health therapist, speaker, author. I have ADHD, and so I have a lot of different kind of ways that I do work. But it all kind of has this through line where I really love supporting people in developing the skills they need to do life better. And so I love to teach through workshops, online platforms, that sort of thing. And I'm also the mom of four now adult kids. So I'm empty
No way.
nesting. Yeah, I'm empty nesting. And so there's a lot of just like transitional things that are happening in my life that I'm here for. So yeah, it's a
Wow, I
bit
need
of
to get some tips from you. You look so much younger than having four adult children. Wow.
I started in my early 20s, so that's part of
Okay.
it. But yeah.
Okay. Wow. So what inspired you to follow this path?
So I stayed at home for a long time after I graduated with a degree in history. I stayed at home for a while with my kiddos. And then at one point, my husband and we have three biological children, and we decided to adopt through foster care. And so he was almost 8 years old, came with a really big story. And I was introduced to the world of social work through that process. And I was always just kind of waiting for something to ping me. I'm very just kind of intuitive in the way that I move through the world. So until I found something, I had the privilege of staying home, and until I found something that really drew me into a different space, I was kind of waiting for that. And when I saw what social workers did, and then also really struggled to find a therapist who could understand adoption, trauma in general, saw kids, all of that. I just thought, oh, that's what I'll do. I'll go to graduate school and I'll become a therapist for kids. It took a different route. I don't actually see kids, but worked in education for a while, that sort of thing. But that was my introduction to this world and just kind of fell in love with this field of work.
What did you fall in love with? A transformation or what was it?
Yeah, it was the transformation. It was the possibility. For social work in particular, there's so many different routes you can go, and that was really intriguing. And at any point, I could get a completely different job, maybe in the medical field or whatever it is. And so just the constant evolution of a career sounded really fascinating to me and in a helping profession. And so I just kind of followed those pings again to like find where I've landed now. Um, Doing education, speaking, writing a book, and seeing clients as well. And so um, I love to evolve. I just love to like tweak things and see what's better, what
Mhm.
can be better. And so this is a great field for me to do that.
So you mentioned you had ADHD. Did that influence your path or your choices?
Well, looking back, yes, I
Mhm.
actually was just diagnosed a couple months ago
Oh,
with it.
wow. We hear a lot about it. What is it exactly? Because I think it's something that it's more awareness of the name, but I still don't really know what it is.
Yeah, and it's really different in women. That's why we tend to go undiagnosed for a long time. So ADHD is just, there's parts of your brain that are underdeveloped. And for ADHD, it's just the executive functioning parts of our brain. We also tend to, and I'm learning more and more. So hopefully I don't botch this too much, but we also just process information really differently. We learn differently. And so I had always kind of had an inkling. I tend to attract a lot of neurodivergent people in my life. And so watching them kind of move through life and the things they say, oh, that's my ADHD, oh, this, I'm thinking, huh, that's really interesting. I do that as well. Um, and then there's kind of in July, a big kind of come to Jesus moment, if you will, around it. Like, I just want to know if this is how my brain functions because I'd kind of gotten myself into a pickle with overdoing some things, which is classic ADHD for me. And so I sought out a diagnosis, and it was pretty significantly so that I have ADHD. And so looking back, I can see how my ADHD played into things.
Mhm.
but I wasn't aware of it at the time. And I think it could have been really different in a way if I had been aware of it along the way. Could have been better in some ways just to know that about myself and really lean more towards those strategies that would cater to my brain and nervous system. Because I think I was trying to operate in a neurotypical way
Mhm.
when I'm not neurotypical.
Is it something to do with attention? Then is it something to do with attention? Like just it's
Yeah.
very intense attention or just low attention span? How is it exactly?
Yeah, so there's different types of ADHD. There's the inattentive, which is typically where women who are diagnosed fall under. And so, yes, we have a hard time maintaining focus unless it's something that we're super focused in, like it grabs our attention. And so there's a couple ways to navigate that. One, I'm lucky enough that one of my hyper focuses is work. I love what I do. And so I can spend a lot of time doing things that center around my work. If something, though, is boring, tasks like paying my taxes,
Mhm.
it's rough. It's really rough to get. Like I have to find ways to kind of dangle a carrot in front of myself in order to get the dopamine hit from doing monotonous things. I really struggle with it. And then when I get in the flow, it's like, okay, I've got to get everything I need done because I'm actually in that flow moment.
Mhm.
So then I'll just spend 2 or 3 hours getting a bunch of stuff done and then not think about it for months and months and months.
So how
So,
have you taken on this diagnosis? Are you okay with it? Because I see you're smiling now, and you seem to just
yeah.
maybe have maybe more insight about how you work. Is that how it's been for
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, and I don't hold diagnoses necessarily in super high regard,
Mm,
simply because I think they're very much connected to like big pharma and insurance companies, at least in the United States, around getting access to services and that sort of thing. And there's just a lot that goes into the naming of the diagnoses and how people identify with them and all of that. So I hold that kind of diagnosis very lightly. But for me in this case, it was really helpful because some of the maybe behaviors and ways that I've navigated things that I've carried some guilt or shame around, it helped shift that, like, oh, that it's just like I didn't understand how to navigate that situation because my brain just wasn't picking up what everybody else was putting down or whatever it is. So it's helped me release some of that.
mhm,
And then also lean into some more strategies and have more grace for myself around how I function in the world. And then that just kind of carries over into how other people function as well. I have a lot more compassion for people that I interact with and how they move through the world because
mhm,
I'm understanding myself more and more,
mhm.
which I think is just a really beautiful byproduct when we really lean into self-discovery and figuring out things about ourselves, what our secret sauce is, how we move through the world. We just have so much more compassion and kindness for the ways others move through the world.
Mhm.
Obviously with boundaries, but around that, but still a lot more understanding for others.
Mhm. Speaking of understanding for others, how about your therapy? What kind of approach do you have to therapy? I saw lots of
Mhm.
different types of services that you offer on your website.
Yes. Yeah. So therapy, I focus, my expertise is in trauma, and I see only assigned female at birth clients and female identifying clients. And
Mm,
so that means I'm typically focusing on sexual trauma. That's a huge piece when working with women, just because statistically, that's a pretty high probability for women. And I do use several different modalities. My two favorites are EMDR, which is becoming more and more of something that people are talking about. I've seen it even mentioned on TV shows and all kinds of things. And then internal family systems or IFS. That's like parts work. We call it parts work.
So what's the first
And
one
so
then? EMDR? What is that?
EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is a really long name for essentially it's bilateral stimulation of your brain. So people can do it in different ways. You can follow like a light bar and your eyes are moving from corner to corner that alternately stimulates both sides of your brain. You can listen to headphones that have a sound that goes back and forth. You can just tap.
Oh, wow.
on both sides of your body, but it can't be at the same time. It needs to be alternating. And it's one of the two modalities that we know actually rewires your brain. It restructures your neural connections. And it is the most evidence-based modality for treating trauma. First, really, a lot of the research centered around treating veterans with PTSD. And since then, just a lot more research for treating all kinds of things. And so I've actually found that a combination, doing EMDR and parts work at the same time, is just spectacular. And I really also love psychoeducation. So teaching people those skills that we've never learned, that we've never had a formal education in to be well.
Mhm. So the second
So
thing you mentioned, what was it? Internal family.
yeah, systems.
Is that
Yeah.
anything like,
Yeah.
is that anything? I just think about family constellations. Is it anything like?
Yes.
Oh
It's
wow.
like that, but internal.
Oh
So
wow.
when you think about like when you're thinking about that family systems model and the different dynamics that you have with family members, thought, behavior patterns, all of that, this is centers around your internal family systems model. So essentially, us as adults caring for younger parts of ourselves.
Uh,
We all have kind of sub-personalities or younger versions of ourselves that carry burdens. They have different jobs that they perform. For example, I have discovered a part that I name them sometimes. I call the librarian. So she is kind of the one that shushes me. So when I need to speak up and advocate for myself, that this part has kind of kept me quiet for a long time because that was quote unquote safer for me as a child to not speak up. And
okay.
so this part stepped into that role of like, okay, it's safer for Cher to not speak up and speak up for her needs and that sort of thing. And so that's great when I'm a child potentially to help with safety, but as an adult, I need to be practicing adult strategies, not childlike strategies. So as an adult, it's safe for me to speak up and use my voice. And again, that's kind of relative depending on, the country that you live in and your race and culture and all kinds of things. But
Mm. I love it.
for me,
Something I
yeah.
loved on your website that I saw is you said solution-based therapy. In my experience with therapy,
Mm.
it's never been solution-based. It's always been cause-based, and it just seems like I've done a lot of talk therapy in my life, and
Mhm.
I think the first few sessions you get this offload. It's very cathartic, but then when you're
Yeah.
going back, it feels like the therapist wants to keep you in that kind of mode of that was my experience of the
Yeah.
victim and you're just going over things and also it's kind of like an ego thing. It's kind of nice to go to someone every week and just talk about yourself, so
Yeah.
it gets you become like Woody Allen. You're just like you're just in this constant neurotic cycle just
Stream of
talking about
consciousness in your own world.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I found that, and it was funny because that when the day I have a lunar scheduling publishing
Mhm.
schedule for this podcast. We do full moon, new moon, and all that. So
I
when I
love that.
started the podcast, it was the full moon in August 2021, and that day, because it was full moon about letting go of things that don't serve you, I actually I kind of fired my therapist that day. I was like, we're
I
doing
love that.
something new. And it was really funny because she wrote back to me saying that she was surprised. I thought, I'm not as messed up as you think I am, you know? So it was just because I just felt like it was going to a place that I wasn't really evolving. And I've always found that with talk therapy, it
Mhm.
gets to a point where it becomes too Freudian in my experience. I think it's good to look at causes, but maybe that's the thing about Spain, because I've done most of my therapy here or in England as well. So I like to see when I see things that are solution based, it sounds like really empowering because you don't want to be going over the same things all your life about childhood.
Oh,
You can't identify with that forever. You got to break out and evolve.
yeah.
What do you think?
I absolutely hear you on that. I think what I tell people around therapy is that I think therapy is for everyone, but not every therapist is for
Mm,
everyone.
mm,
And I have heard some pretty tricky stories over the years from people who come to me with their experiences with other therapists. And so I really encourage people to shop around. And the minute you hint at not discomfort in doing your own work, but something doesn't sit right in that relationship, move on and try and find somebody else. Because it is such an important relationship. I'm a therapist who sees a therapist.
mhm,
Um, and for me, I go to see my therapist when I can't manage the things on my own. I feel like I need a witness or a guide. And so I'm kind of on an as needed basis. And that is my goal for all of my clients. And that
Mm,
is their goal. They don't want to be in therapy forever and talking to somebody every week. It's expensive. It, takes time and resources. Um, so my goal is really to help people develop those skills internally. It's my favorite thing when clients are like, "Hey, I think I want to, go to every other week, or I'm going to go to every month," and we kind of do this timeline. And then they move to as needed. The other day, I was working with a client, and she's like telling me all these ways that she's tending to herself and her parts. She's so self-regulated and self-trusting now. And she's like, I feel ready to just go to as needed. And I was like, absolutely. Big disco ball party right now. Like, this is so exciting for me. I love to teach people the skills to do well. I don't necessarily want to just keep them in my orbit
mm.
all the time. I adore my clients, but they need to, there's something so sacred and beautiful about feeling capable and confident in your ability to navigate life better and better.
I love
So,
as needed. It
yeah,
sounds amazing because I think with mine it was
very fun.
I think I wanted to do like as needed or every other week, and she says no, you got to go every week, and I was like okay. So
I
I,
like that in the beginning. I call
yeah,
it for getting traction, just so I
yeah,
can get to know somebody. We're just going to get further faster if we can, get some traction in the beginning. So I
mm,
encourage that. And I also know that's not feasible for everybody in the States. I'm private pay, I don't navigate insurance. I do offer a sliding scale
mm,
to make it accessible to a certain percentage of my clientele. Um, but it's not feasible for everybody to go every week, and I feel like clients know themselves the best, and so I want to hear what works best for them. I'm going to offer options and
mm,
then allow them to choose, because that is a huge starting point for this work of just consent and options.
mm,
They need more options. We need more options as humans to pick what works for us and tune in. And so I like to start from that place, but I do with clients, obviously we go back
mm,
in time because those parts of ourselves need tending to. They're stuck on a timeline essentially.
mm,
And so I'm going to go back to my 6-year-old self, and she's stuck in a hospital bed because she had some medical trauma, and she's stuck there carrying the feelings of that experience. I'm going to go back in my mind's eye and connect with her and see what I can do to help her. But then I'm going to bring her along my timeline.
mm,
So she knows who I am now. I'm going to be caring for her. She's always safe with me, that part of me. And then I do that with all of my parts, but we're not going to sit there in the soup of it, is what I call it,
mm.
where we just stay in the past and dink around in there and try and stir up trouble. We're going to follow the trailheads that show up for ourselves, and let that be the guide versus me telling clients what to do and how to do it.
I think the therapy I've done is they've never told us what to do. It's just been talk therapy. So you just go
Mm.
in thinking you feel okay, and then you come out crying. There's these things just like pop up. You've got no idea why. It just kind of gone in
Yeah.
a direction that you didn't anticipate, and that can be kind of quite cathartic. But you have to get to a point where that you have to become self-reliant, I think. And the
Yes.
reason I went to therapy the last time, 'cause I've done it several times of several episodes of therapy in my life is I suffer from something called nocturia. So I saw you do CBT, so that would be
Mhm.
something I think I would need. That's really solution based OCD of like frequent urination at night,
Mhm.
which is probably my mind more
Mhm.
than my body. And
Mhm.
the therapist wouldn't say the word nocturia; she used to say the thing that you do or the thing. It's like if you don't bring language in, it's just like saying there's. I think words are important. Sometimes you need to label things and
Words have energy. Yeah, but
yeah.
there might be
Mm,
sometimes I've discovered with physical manifestations of things for myself and my clients. I have autoimmune diseases, several clients who have things like rheumatoid arthritis, and we've gotten to the point where for some of them we can map parts of their body that show up. So parts of them show up with like pain in their shoulder. This is when I feel out of control, when I have pain in my shoulder or a flare in my hand. This is when I feel trapped, kind of thing. Um, and so oftentimes with physical issues, we can follow that trailhead and find a part that maybe needed to wake you up at night. in
Yeah.
order, for safety or whatever it is. There are certain ways that those parts can show up and try and get our attention. And it's pretty phenomenal what can happen if that's the case, if there is a part showing up that way, that you can actually shift that manifestation of it.
So you've got any three tips, for example, for someone who's thinking about doing therapy?
Hmm. Three tips. So one is going to be, I'll reiterate, please shop around.
Hmm.
Um, you want to think about, most therapists should be offering a 15 to 20 minute free consultation. And I do that just as much for myself as for the client, but I want to see if this is a client that I can help and that is a good fit for me.
Hmm.
Um, and so we'll do a consultation. So set up 3 or 4 of those and really kind of tune into your body in that process. Look at their picture. What kinds of feelings do you get when you see their picture? I mean, I've just found over the years that as I have become more clear about the clients I want to help, that they just gravitate towards me. And it's been a really long time since I felt like, oh, I took on someone who wasn't a good fit for me. So shop around for sure. Make sure you're kind of, as much as you can, paying attention to those signals in your body. Um, and then work with someone who's going to ask some questions. So work with someone who's going to help you build the skills.
Hmm.
Are they just a talk therapist that you're just going to sit there and talk every week? That's fine. Like you said in the beginning, it's helpful to talk. You can kind of release things. But at some point, you do need to be practicing tools and strategies to help you manage things outside of that session, right? So if we're in session together, I'm going to be able to guide you, notice, hey, it looks like something's coming up. What do you notice is happening in your body? What do you think this is connected to? Let's get curious with it. But outside of that space, clients need to have the tools and strategies to do that for themselves. So find someone who's going to actually teach you things to practice on your own space. And then the third thing would probably be, either choose a therapist who can help you with um, somatic modalities as well. So trauma, we know that it really sticks in the body, and that's usually what I call the final frontier of the therapy journey of getting at the stuff that's stuck in your body in different ways. So either find a therapist who practices some sort of somatic experiencing or somatic supports around that processing. And internal family systems and EMDR is that for me.
Hmm.
Um, or add in extra practitioners, add in people to your village who do that work with the body, because so much gets stuck in there that
Hmm.
we want to make sure we excavate and kind of release as well.
Amazing. So tell us about your podcast. It has an interesting name.
Yes, it's called Make Discomfort Your Bitch.
Okay.
And so my belief is that we give way too much power over to uncomfortable things, meaning we allow them to influence us to, play small, to avoid trying new things. It just makes our world a really small place when we allow discomfort to be driving the bus versus owning it. So I talk about owning discomfort so it doesn't own you.
Hmm.
Um,
So
and it's
how can we
just
leverage discomfort then?
I think there's so much leverage in discomfort. It's just we need the skills to navigate it well in order to tap into its potential. And so, really foundationally, we need self-awareness and self-management to manage the discomfort well. So, when I think about, let's just say raising 4 teens at this point, I've already raised 4 teenagers. Well, raising parenting teenagers is quite uncomfortable.
Mm.
And if I didn't build the skills to be able to leverage that discomfort and really push at my edges, build my skill set, find deeper and better ways to connect to my kids and support them, um, because they're looking at me to how I navigate life. And so I've got to model and teach them. If I hadn't done that, then we would probably have much more strained relationships. Maybe, empty nesting would feel really difficult and hard because I would feel like I didn't do a good job or I didn't put all my effort into it. So I think there's so much power in just learning to manage the uncomfortable and actually even lean into it,
Mm.
choose it, and figure out how to navigate it better so that we can make our worlds just a bigger and better place.
I love it. Okay. Do you interview people as well? I saw you on your Instagram, you're
I do. Yeah. Yeah. Just similar to this. Yeah. I ask them a
okay.
few questions and then usually the conversation just kind of takes whatever route it takes. But it's
Mm.
been a really fun project. I've just been doing it since January. I
Oh
actually
wow.
woke up one day and had the name of the podcast in my mind when I woke up, which is how the outline for my book came as well. I
Mm.
woke up and it was there in my brain, and I just picked up my phone and started writing down notes. And so I just thought, oh, okay, I guess I'm starting a podcast called Make Discomfort Your Bitch.
It must be nice for you to, I can imagine maybe like connecting with other professionals in the field rather than just their clients all the time. Would that be something you enjoy?
Yeah.
Mm.
It has, and the first season was really about connecting with people I know.
Mm.
And it was so neat to have these really intentional conversations with people that some of them that I know super, super well. Um, but just to really light each other up with hearing each other's stories. And I really like to focus on not as much around the discomfort, but how they've navigated it, how their relationship with it has evolved. So it's more of a people are going to walk away with some tangible strategies. That's really important to me. Instead of just kind of abstract ideas around things, they get to like walk away with things that they can practice right away.
Amazing. I made a
Yeah.
speech once called Pain is the Greatest Teacher. Because I
Yeah.
think, when you hit rock bottom, unless you're a masochist, you just want to do whatever you can to kind of bounce back. So you're kind of looking, you consider things that
Mhm.
you wouldn't have had you not been in that place of discomfort.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we as humans do a lot to try and avoid discomfort, and not because the discomfort itself is bad or wrong.
Mm.
Um, I think it's just because we just don't we've never been taught how to navigate it well. But life is super uncomfortable and it's incredibly beautiful
Mm.
and joyful too. But it's really hard to experience the beauty and the joy if we don't know how to navigate the tricky life stuff well, because we'll just be sitting in that all the time,
Mm.
sitting in the discomfort. And so, yeah, it just creates a lot more space for us to be better humans, I believe.
I saw something very intriguing on your Instagram, which was the superpower was to choose thoughts, feelings, and behaviors you want to keep and release the ones you don't. So how can we do that?
Well, it's an interesting thing. So I kind of use this grocery store analogy with that. So from the ages of 0 to 7, there's a part of our brain called the reticular activating system, or RAS, or whatever you want to call it, that is our brain's filtering system. It helps us prioritize things, helps us store things that matter. And up until around the age 7, that is not fully formed. And so we just really absorb a lot of things. So I use this analogy of like you're going to the grocery store and imagine every time your back is turned, away from your cart and towards like a shelf and you're picking something up, someone else is walking by and tossing things in your cart.
Mm.
So by the time you end up at the end of the checkout stand, you've got a bunch of stuff in your cart that you didn't choose, someone else put there, because a lot of what we think, feel, say, and do is because of what the adults and people around us from ages 0 to 7 thought, felt, said, and did. And so we really want to, when we are aware of that, recognize that like we didn't choose a lot of what we think, feel, say, and do.
Mm.
So that's a moment that I feel like is really pivotal and special and sacred, is that we get to just pause and go, I don't know if I like that thought, or I say and do that thing, and it's not very connecting. And so I know I can see that I came by it honestly, but I don't want it anymore. So I'm going to replace it. I'm going to shift, and I'm going to actually put more choice into the things I think, feel, say, and do. Again, we can't choose the automatic because that was all installed from 0 to 7 and beyond. But when we bring awareness to it, we can go, oh, I don't like that.
Mm.
I want to, I want something different. I want to believe that I am good enough instead of not being good enough. I want to believe that, I can figure it out and I'm capable instead of, I can't do it. I'm just going to play small.
Mm.
So it's a really beautiful space to be in to say no. And then use some strategies to actually replace it. Because I can say, no, I don't want that. But unless I have something to actually replace it, my brain's going to go back to that place.
Okay, you have to replace it. So,
Yeah. It can't
okay.
just be like, no, we don't want to think that anymore. We don't want to think we're not good enough. We actually have to say, what do I want to replace it with? What do I want to practice? And then we have to think it, feel it, say it, do it enough to create new neural connections that create a different pathway. It's kind of like laying new train tracks for a new direction. Yeah. It's
I
pretty
think
great that we don't have to get stuck with all that shit
yeah.
from from other people, you know? It's so liberating. Yeah.
Mm. I think when I think about my own situation, I think all my life, I was brought up Irish, from an Irish Catholic background. So, you know, for women, it's been quite bad, the reproductive rights, and there's no
Mhm.
condoms until 1991 or something. It was like,
Yeah.
can you imagine? So I was
Wow.
always taught, all of this repression and shame. It's like I have an analogy of a backpack. Here's the backpack, and
Yep.
I'm like, no, no, I don't want the backpack. I'm going to become a sex blogger. So I've
I'm
had
going to push at
that.
all the edges and discomforts of myself and other people. No, I absolutely get that. I was raised in a very similar type religion that has similar beliefs. And so that repression it weighs heavily
Mm,
and they're all patriarchal. And so all of it weighs very heavily on people who are socialized and identify as female. So it is a lot to unpack.
mm,
Um, and it's also really, really worth it because I personally would do anything to not transfer my trauma to my kids and other people I'm in a relationship with. I care so deeply about humans
mhm.
that I want to do whatever I can to be a safer person for them to be around. And so it's worth it. The effort's so worth it. I've never experienced such just grounding and capacity to navigate some really tricky things that continue to show up in my life. Um, it just is better. You can actually get comfortable with the uncomfortable, more comfortable with the uncomfortable.
That's great. So tell
Mhm.
us about your book.
So my book is just really based off of all the work that I've been talking about. I felt like in the self-help space, there was such a huge gap in research and tools and strategies. I feel like there's a lot of high level things like here's how to have healthy communication, but there was not a lot of attention brought to, well, in order for me to communicate in healthy ways, I have to be aware of what is happening in me, right? What
Mhm,
I'm thinking, saying, and doing at a given time, and then know how to manage that. So self-management, so that I can then practice healthy communication skills. But if I'm not self-aware and I'm not self-regulated, I'm going to have a really hard time building these communication skills. So I saw this just kind of gap. I also feel like a lot of those books are very academic. And while I absolutely used evidence-based practices and research and everything in my work, it's much more conversational.
mhm,
It's in my voice. I swear. I use different analogies, all kinds of things, but I really simplify it so that anybody, if you're your own personal development guru or you've never opened a self-help book in your life, you're going to get something from it. And so I focus a lot on building that self-awareness and self-management, and then the relational skills. But two-thirds of the book is about you and what you're bringing to the table when it comes to relationships. And so it's essentially social emotional intelligence building.
And what's the
And
title?
it's called Could It Be Better?
Uh-huh.
Um, it's really fun. I made a playlist. So at the beginning of each chapter, there's songs to like that have to do with the chapter,
Oh,
the
that's so
theme.
cool.
So there's a Spotify playlist with it. There's a QR code in the book that leads people to dive deeper resources. So like when new research comes out or, hey, this TikTok talks about boundaries in a great way, people can just use the QR code and connect to that resource. Um, and lots of case studies. So I really distill it into like what it looks like, sounds like. with scripts and that sort of thing. So it just is so accessible to everybody. And it's been really fun. I've had college age kids reading it, all the way to whatever age. So it's really phenomenal book for everybody, I believe.
Amazing. When was it released?
It was August of 2023. So
Oh,
just
wow.
over the year mark with it.
Mhm.
And you can find it on Amazon.
Amazing. Okay, a couple of questions. Speaking of books, this is a
Yes.
question I ask everyone.
Yeah.
What's the book that changed your life?
Hmm. The book that changed my life, I would say, is No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz.
Mm,
He's the one who developed the internal family systems model.
mhm,
And I'm forever grateful that book changed my life. Yeah. And my clients' lives because I practice the modality with them and it's
mm.
phenomenal.
And tell us about the book.
So he talks about how every human has these different parts, right, that we've kind of mentioned earlier, but that they're not bad parts. They just are showing up in ways that are not helpful anymore. And so we really want to, it's kind of like taking a different spin on shadow work, so to speak, like looking at those parts of ourselves that we don't really like to look at very often. But if we consider them, just small children who are carrying these burdens, it's easier to go to them and tend to them. And he's got great protocols in there. He really explains the modality and the framework in a beautiful way. And so yeah, that modality has just changed my life incredibly.
Mhm. Another question I ask everyone is, what is the phrase or affirmation that you live by?
Hmm. It used to be that when you know better, you do better, but a lot of us know a lot of things and we still can't quite do better. Um, and so I'm not sure. I was asked that question actually recently and I got really stumped with it. I need to find
Mm.
a new phrase. I'll just go with, I guess, own discomfort so it doesn't own you.
Uh-huh.
I guess I'll just stick with that for now till I find my new one.
Cool. And what are you working on now?
Right now, I'm working on turning my book into a course.
Oh,
And
that's so
so
cool.
it's going to be, yeah, an online course and community. And I'm excited for the vision of this. I've created courses in the past, and this is going to be similar, but way better, way
Mhm.
better. Shorter videos, really accessible content. And the platform is going to be kind of in an app form versus like a website. And so it's going to be really user friendly for folks to access this type of work. And
You're
I'm going to
creating your
seek
own app.
out
You're creating your own app.
yeah,
Oh, wow.
essentially.
Exciting.
Yeah. And then I'm going to market it to employers. I really want to work with companies that care about value adds for employees. So I
Mm.
have an online parenting course and then a course that will be based off of my book that I think will be a huge value add and super affordable for businesses, employers to have for their employees.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. I think that's the way content is going now in that way.
Mhm.
Online courses are really big at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, but not a lot of people finish them. And
Mm,
so I want to kind of push at that a bit
mm.
and dig into really take that feedback of why people have a hard time finishing the courses and push at it and hopefully change that. Yeah.
Definitely. I'm on the same journey as well of creating courses.
Yeah,
It's really fun.
I
Yeah.
love that. What are you
Yeah.
creating a course around?
I've got a course that's on a couple of platforms. One of the platforms is called Beducated. It's a great
Mm,
it's a revenue share system. So it's
mhm,
like sexual wellness courses, and mine is
mhm.
5 sex toys that every collection should have for women, and then just
Love
like
it.
which, and how to choose like of different the rabbit, like how which rabbit
Mhm,
to choose and how to use them, and
mhm.
because there's so much overwhelm in this topic. There's just
Yes, it
people
can
don't know
be
what to
so
buy.
intimidating.
And also people don't, they can't touch the product, so they don't know what they're like.
Yeah.
There's just so much shame around this topic as well. But people, it does like sex toys are experiences, they're not just products. It's way deeper than that. And And I'm currently creating, I've just published my fourth book called Orgasmic Manifestation. It's in Spain, it's in all
Oh,
the bookshops. Now I'm
I
translating
love
to
that.
English. I'm also creating a course because that's a really cool, because not everyone is a reader. I'm a reader,
Yes,
but not everyone is a reader. So I'm also creating a course. I do some webinars as well. But I think it's just
I love that.
interesting to have, I'm just really fascinated by I'm kind of going more from B to B to B to C with my
Mhm.
content. And a book that really helped me is Make Money While You Sleep, which is a
I know
brilliant
that one.
book. It's a
Yeah.
brilliant book all about different ways of they don't talk about apps, I don't think, but platforms like Teachable and Kajabi.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so I'm looking at Teachable now for a few, and I'm also going to create a new course called with a sexologist in the States called How to Have an Orgasm,
I
because
love
that's the
it.
number one question that people ask me
Yes.
because the people there's this obsession that we should be having more orgasms or that is the how people define successful sex and that's not
Right.
okay. So a lot of pressure
No.
and so I
Yeah.
like getting back into the body and just connecting and just tapping into pleasure. That should be the objective, never orgasm. So I'm
Yeah, that's
like
like
that.
the cherry on top or icing on the cake or something like that. But there's so much more to an experience. So I love that you're teaching that. Yeah, I love that.
And I've created my own journaling. I think journaling's amazing as well for
Mhm.
reprogramming. So I've created a new journaling technique for manifestation because I have this in my book, Orgasmic Manifestation. It's about how to harness your sexual energy and focus your orgasm on an intention. So it's
Yes.
really, it's
I've
amazing.
heard of that. No,
Yeah,
somebody I follow mentioned it on her podcast, and I was like, oh, that is so fascinating to
yeah.
manifest that way. So I'm here for it. I can't wait for you to put that good work out into the world. And I think about, the whole make money while you sleep concept. To me, as someone who's a practitioner who works one to one or, one to a few, it's just it signals to me that more people are accessing super important information. Like
Mm,
even having an orgasm, like there's so many things foundationally that we need to pay attention to, like building our awareness of what our bodies are doing. Is it a safe place to pay attention to? And there's a lot of trauma that needs to be healed in order for us to access that pleasure. So,
And also, if you talked about scaling, like sometimes if a client cannot afford to have your sessions, I'm
mhm.
sure the course is going to be more
Yes.
affordable and they
Yeah,
get to access your
absolutely.
content in you to a certain extent.
Yeah, I pour a lot of heart and soul into my work and I do community calls so they can access me weekly live and all of that. So I'm excited to build that out again
Mm,
and focus on that. So, yeah.
amazing. Cool.
Thank you.
So where can people find you?
So I'm on TikTok and Instagram. I'm not super active in those spaces anymore. I focus my energy on other places, but you'll get there's a lot of background information. You can go through my page, and I have a lot of tips on parenting and building social emotional intelligence and relationships. So at Cher Anderton on TikTok and Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. And then my website is shareanderton.com, and you can find everything you need to know. My podcast book, you can get a signed copy directly from me on that website. So all of that, just Google me, and I'm usually the only Cher Anderton that pops up. So
Yeah, I found that. Yeah. And what
yes,
do you actually do consulting like for global clients or is it just
yeah,
locally?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for businesses and corporations, really happy to do that international work. Absolutely.
Amazing. So Cher Anderson, thank you for
Thank you.
joining us today on the Orgasmic Lifestyle Podcast.
Thanks, Venus, for having me. It's been a pleasure.